Hey kids, this is Ivan. How you doing? It's no secret that I'm always fascinated about dice and dice mechanics when it comes to role-playing games and the probabilities of those mechanics and how those mechanics shape the way the game feels and the psychology surrounding dice and dice mechanics. And where it tends to get super interesting is any kind of mechanic that involves a sequential roll, whether it's an extended task or re-rolling or whatever. And so I wanted to give you like 3 real-world examples that I've lived through more than once and talk about them and how they feel and what the probabilities are. And I remember trying to make a video I made 3 videos about this like at least 6 or 7 years ago. It took me that many tries with long videos to try to get my point across because I wasn't explaining really well. I'm going to do it much better this time. So let's look at one of the more familiar ones. There are countless games out there where you need to roll high, and if you're really good for some reason, which can vary, you get to roll 2 dice, and you get to take the highest result. Or a variation on this is you roll that die, you fail, and then for some reason you get to re-roll, and then you maybe you'll get it this time. So let's take a look at that. Let's say we're just going to use a 20-sided die. We need to roll a 15 or better, and so our chances of rolling a 15 or better on a 20-sided die are 30% on one die. But let's say we're playing one of those games where I get to roll 2 dice at once, and at least one of them being 15 is now 51%. A lot better. Just the psychology of picking up those 2 dice, even if I'm not sure of the exact numbers, like, okay, well, it's a lot better now, right? Now, if I'm playing a different game, which allows me to re-roll once I've failed, and this is important, this is where the weird psychology gets in, from the point where the game master says, you must now roll to do this thing. If I'm planning to roll or re-roll, or my option to re-roll exists, then at that exact moment, my chances are 51%, just like if I roll them at the same time, right? However, once I've rolled the die once and failed, now things are different. Now, there's nothing magical about this. I'm not that guy talking about like dice affecting each other and all that kind of stuff. What I'm saying is time is linear, and that first roll is now in the past. It's gone. You can never make that roll again, and it failed. So I'm picking up this die again to re-roll to try to get that 15 or better. It is no longer 51%. It's back to 30% because I'm just rolling 1 die. That feels a lot different psychologically when you're in that position. You can tell right away it's a lot different. I had a much more convoluted and interesting example I lived through, and Joe the lawyer, you go find his YouTube channel. It's really cool. Joe the lawyer was running a Lamentations of the Flame Princess game. It was the first, LOTFP game I was in. And my wizard Duras, when he was just first level, really fragile. He got teleported outside. He's outside in the freezing cold. It's kind of freezing like it is now here. Freezing cold. And so Joe says, okay, well, you can try to find your way back in within 2 hours or you freeze to death. So every 10 minutes of game time, you can roll a 6-sided die, and you've got to roll at least 3 ones before that time is up. And if you roll at least 3 ones, they don't have to be sequential, well, then you find your way back in. If not, then you freeze to death outside. Okay, so 12 rolls of a D6 are on the table. I can roll D6 12 times. My chances of rolling 3 ones within those 12 rolls is 32%. We didn't sit down and take out the slide rolls and the calculators to figure that out. But it was one of those things where I'm thinking, well, that's kind of hard, but I bet you I could do that. It sounds like doable. I didn't realize it was that dismal, by the way. So I start rolling. Very first thing that comes up is a 1. Hooray! My chances now have changed from this moment forward. Now I can roll 11 6-sided dice. I've got to get 2 ones from now on. Now my chances are 57% of success from that point forward. Cool, right? Yeah, I felt it. I felt like my chances were a lot better. Well, I'll tell you what happened, kids. For the next, 9 rolls? I rolled everything but a 1. So I get down to the point where I've just got 2 rolls left, and they both have to be 1s. My chances of making it, of success at that moment, with those 2 rolls in front of me, 3%. A little less than 3%, actually. If you're saying, well, actually, I haven't, trust me, I'm rounded, okay? So calm down. 3%. Bad. It felt bad at that moment. I roll that 11th die, and it comes up a 1. Oh, my God. That's awesome. Breathe a sigh of relief. And now my chances of rolling a 1 on this last six-sided die. Well, they're a little shy of 17%, but felt a lot better. I did, by the way, roll that one, and I did make it back inside. Still at the very beginning of this whole thing, it was that 32% chance. But as time went on, and as these other rolls are in the past, the psychology started to change. As I'm rolling 5 and 6 and 7, you can't roll 7, Ivan. You know what I mean? All these other numbers, I was like, oh man, it's getting really, really bad. So, there's a lot of games that use extended tasks, and while we might not take out the calculators and the slide rules, like I said, from time to time while we're doing this, we can start to feel the tension starts to rise as we're missing it. It's like, oh boy, I'm not sure if I'm going to make it. Or if we're really, building up the successes, like saying something like ubiquity, you can start to feel, oh, I think I can really make this now, because then our probabilities from that point forward get higher. So the psychology is really interesting in these extended rolls. The same thing can be said for other roles that we do, and sometimes, as a game designer or game master, we maybe don't take this other part into account, where let's just say that you're really good at something. You've got a 70% chance of doing whatever the thing is, jumping over something. You're trying to escape this place before the whole building collapses. So you've got to, do these feats of acrobatics or athletics or whatever they might be. And let's say, for the sake of argument, we're going to use a D20. You got to roll 7 or higher. 70% chance of doing that. And so say the game master has decided that you've got to make 3 of these attempts successfully to do this. He's put 3 challenges in front of you. And you've got to do all 3 of them. There's only going to be 3, right? 70% chance every single time you do it, right? You take up those dice. However, your chances of successfully navigating all 3 of those, only 34%. Because you got to get them all. If you do the first one successfully, well now, hooray, now you got a 49% chance of making the next 2. You see what I mean? So we might not know, but the psychology can be different. We start to breathe a sigh of relief, or we start saying, man, I got to make all 3 of them? So, once again, game design is hard. You have to take this kind of stuff into account if you're designing a game. Like, what are the effects of having sequential rolls going to be? What are they not just psychologically, but what are they going to be probabilistically? What are the probabilities going to be? Wish I could pronounce that. What are the chances going to be, man? And, also when setting difficulties as a game master, when you say, well, you must do this thing, we have to, we don't necessarily, once again, need to take out the calculators and slide rules, but we have to think about it for a second. But I find, the whole dynamic of sequential rolls really, really fascinating, because it's not just the probabilities morphing, it's the psychology at the table and how it makes that session or that event feel. Know what I mean, Jelly Bean?